I'm sorry. I won't say that.
You can't. You're the organizer.
I just don't curse very well.
It's not believable.
It's not believable when I curse, is it? Okay. Now we're going to be blessed with three people in a panel discussion: Sam Mickey, Elizabeth McNally, and Kim Carfer. We're going to talk to us about love in the planetary era, which is really about a forthcoming issue of World Futures magazine of the same title. And they are all contributors of that in that issue. And I want to say that along with cosmology and love, their research interests include water. I think we know who that is. Water and religion and ecology, Elizabeth. Environmental philosophy, among many other things, I would add, Sam. And ecofeminism, as I come to find out in the environmental ethics course with Kim. So welcome them as they talk about that topic.
Hi. So, as Rand was saying, this little presentation is a celebration of a forthcoming publication of World Futures Journal. And our issue is titled Nature and Eros, Love in the Planetary Era. And by our little presentation, we really want to encourage and inspire everyone here to participate in mainstream academia through publications, through conferences like these, so that we can try to integrate our community in the larger global community. So the topic of our issue is inspired by a number of people. One, Rand, for his overwhelming, abundance of love in these conferences on a cosmology of love. Also, the topic of our journal is inspired by Brian Swim and Carrie Brady and their course in PCC called Nature and Eros, which initiates students into a felt sense of their identity as embedded within the erotic unfolding of the universe. And our issue is inspired, thirdly, by Sean Kelly and Edgar Morin and their notion of a planetary era. And if you haven't heard of Morin, just hang out with Sean long enough, and you're sure to. And so by planetary era, it refers to a sense where the human presence is felt globally around the world. There's no natural or cultural place within the Earth that's isolated from the vast networks of globalization. And a lot of this planetization has been taking place within the last 500 years through processes of international trade, colonialism, warfare, industrialization, economic development, telecommunications, and other ways. And so these processes of globalization are connecting humans with one another and with the planet. And so Morin says that the history of globalization is an evolution toward planetary consciousness. It's an evolution of the planetary era. So we're living in a planetary civilization where we're entangled with the entire Earth community. And so our topic, Nature and Eros, Love in the Planetary Era, for this World Futures issue, it's looking at love in a sense that's not just about sentimentalism. It's not just about human emotion, but it's a love in a philosophical way. Love that's related to issues of interconnectedness, responsibility, transformative contact, erotic longing, otherness, relationality. And we're drawing from the works of Michael Hart and Antonio Negri in their trilogy Empire, Multitude, Commonwealth, where they say that love is a material and political sense of love. Love is about bringing together the multitude, the people, coming together to form a common world, to resist issues of oppression, issues where global capitalism has oppressed the multitude. So coming together to form a new society. And they say without this kind of political and material sense of love, then we are nothing. And so with this, I want to give you just an overview of what the issue is about. We have contributions by Brian, Swim, and Carrie Brady on their course, Nature and Eros. We have contribution from Regula Wegman, who's looking at love in terms of systems theory and complexity science. Also, Matt Siegel is giving his take of love in light of Gaia theory and the emerging paradigm of inactivism. We have a contribution from Jeff Jenkins, who's talking about indigenous rituals of gratitude and the new cosmology. Martina Daniger is contributing, doing a piece on feminism. David Haberman is contributing a piece on forest ecology and how to love in an age of planetary destruction. And Sam and Kim are also contributing, looking at ecofeminism. So they're going to give you an overview of their particular essay right now.
Yeah, so that's the issue as a whole. And then what Kim and I wrote together is an essay called Planetary Love, Ecofeminist Perspectives on Globalization. And so basically what I'll do is just say a little bit what ecofeminism is, and then we'll get a little closer to what we mean by planetary love. But first, just for people who aren't familiar, feminism, I think everybody just knows the basic sense of feminism being against sexism, against the oppression of women. Ecofeminism recognizes ties between the oppression of women and the oppression of nature. And so actually, instead of just being against sexism, ecofeminism is against multiple interlocking systems of domination. And so what we're doing in our work is to show how globalization has these kind of systems of domination at work in it, and then anti-globalization movements do too. So anti-globalization, not an option. We're after a sustainable, multi-form, planetary civilization. We can't be anti-globalization. And so ecofeminism is providing an alternative. It's able to critique the structures of domination at work in globalization and at work in anti-globalization, and provide some kind of middle ground where we're able to affirm the things that are normally homogenized or oppressed by globalization, like local cultures, ecosystems, diversity, while still affirming the unity of a planetary civilization. So I think that's enough about ecofeminism. Just to give you a sense of the particular ecofeminists we're dealing with, there's really three. Gayatri Spivak, an Indian literary theorist and deconstructionist. Donna Haraway, who's just down at UC Santa Cruz, and Val Plumwood. And so we're sort of drawing those three together. And it's mainly from Kim that we're working with Val Plumwood, and so she'll talk a little bit more about the underlying system of domination that we see throughout globalization, which we can call the logic of domination or the logic of colonization.
So Karen Warren talks about the logic of domination, and Plumwood, who I'm going to talk about, calls it the logic of colonization, and she talks about it in her book, Feminism and the Mastery of Nature. And basically, it says that the underlying logic that connects, or that humans colonizing nature, this underlying logic is the same logic that you see in oppression with male-female, preferring self over the other, human over nature, civilized over primitive, and reason over emotion, as you see in our current paradigm. So basically, there's a difference here.
Just get you closer to the mic so
I can.
okay.
Okay.
Step closer.
Okay. So there's obviously a difference between male and female, civilized, primitive, whatnot, and whether or not this is innate, you can go off the essentialist argument, but we're not going to go there right now. So there's these differences. The problem here is that one is valued over the other. And this value becomes naturalized and passed down over generations, leading to systemic oppression, and it justifies subordination. So, for example, men or women who used to go and work out in the field, started miscarrying their babies, so they were kind of put back into the household. So then this kind of just got passed down to where, men are stronger than women should be in the household without questioning what's going on underneath all of this. So nowadays, you see it in, as men making more money than women. I think, do you want to go off now?
Yeah, that sums it up. It's so you get the basic sense that what we're talking about is hierarchies, basically. That you notice a difference, and then that difference becomes a hierarchy, where one thing is better than the other. So you notice men have, more upper body strength than women, then all of a sudden that becomes a sort of better, worse thing. And then once you have that hierarchy, the hierarchy becomes a justification for domination. So Karen Warren calls it the logic of domination. Val Plumwood calls it the logic of colonization. That's what globalization is basically doing. So when we talk about economic globalization, the McDonaldization of the world, the Disneyfication of the world, whatever you want to call it, it's the same system where we have a creation of hierarchies so that reason is oppressing emotion, mind oppressing the body, self oppressing the other, humans oppressing nature, men oppressing women. It's all the same logic of hierarchy. Anti-globalization is doing the same thing, it just flips the hierarchy. Where now all of a sudden we're going to privilege the local instead of the global, we'll privilege emotion and intuition instead of reason, right? Privilege the body instead of the mind. So what we're seeing then is that ecofeminists reject both of those. We don't want to be globalization, we don't want to be anti-globalization. So what we have is something different. And for Spivak, the idea is simply this. Instead of the globe, let's try to imagine the planet. And the planet isn't the local. And the planet's not the global. The planet is in the species of alterity. Now, alterity is just a slightly fancier word for saying otherness. The planet is otherness. And so basically the idea is love is the non-coercive, mutually transformative contact whereby we're able to encounter the other. And so planetary love, instead of globalization, which homogenizes differences, and instead of anti-globalization, which just favors the local, we have planetary love that seeks to engage all of the differences of the planet in a loving way that brings them together in mutually transformative contact. So this is similar to what Donna Haraway is calling companion species relationships. Where basically the idea is, we have never been human. You might think we have. We've never been human. The human from the beginning is constituted through and through by its relationships with non-humans. Even in just the crook of your elbow, there's like a micro ecosystem with at least 6 different species of bacteria hanging out. The human is thoroughly engaged in other relationships that make it such that there was never an isolated human. So we're in companion species relationships with everything else in the Earth community. These relationships are relationships of significant otherness. Your significant other isn't just your boyfriend or girlfriend or your wife or your husband. Significant others are all the other species that make up our being. So that's what we're talking about, is basically recognizing the otherness of the planet. And there's a lot more to say about that. I mean, one of the points here is that that means we're not out to save the world. You can't say, I want to save the planet. That's then your other. I want to save my planet. It's my other, I want to protect it. If you're really recognizing an underived alterity, then that means you have to actually foreclose the possibility of saying save the planet. It doesn't mean we don't want to save the planet. It just means there's a planet out there that's beyond all of your wanting to save it or not wanting to save it. That's the planet you have to look at. Also means it's not Gaia. Right? Gaia is a complex, self-organizing, web of relationships. We're talking about the planet as wholly other, which is withdrawn from any kind of relationships, even the beautiful, self-organizing complexity of Gaia. So that's the kind of radical message of seeing the planet as other, or recognizing the significant otherness of your companion species. And I think Kim has also done some work with this, showing how Spivak and Haraway are drawing on Jacques Derrida's understanding of otherness. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, a little bit. So Jacques Derrida talks about the other as that which is wholly other, and he brings up the idea of the Aravant. So this other that is completely other than what we know, and it shatters our worldview. And so welcoming that, not this idea of the incorporated other, like the other as myself's other, this idea of what I think this other is. So I think true love would be to leave this sense of withdrawn otherness that we can never contact, to leave that intact. And I think he says it really well in his book, Writing Indifference. He says, "What then is this encounter with the absolutely other? Truthfully, one does not have to wonder what this encounter is. It is the encounter, the only way out, the only adventuring out oneself toward the unforeseeably other without hope of return." And that's the important part, without hope of return. "There is no way to conceptualize the encounter. It is made possible by the other, the unforeseeable, resistant to all categories. Concepts suppose an anticipation." So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and so a point about this would be that the holy other isn't just the other to yourself. And so like Alex talking about the alien wouldn't be out of this world. But the alien isn't in the world either. What happens when you encounter the holy other is that the holy other shatters your horizon of expectations, your horizon of meanings and anticipation. And so the holy other wouldn't be reducible to either in the world or out of the world. It shatters your very idea of where the world starts and stops. So there's an ecological thinker, Timothy Morton, who's he's given a nice word for this idea of the holy other. Because holy other always sounds like it's the other to yourself. And it's like, no, we're talking about holy other. It's beyond your self-other dialectic. So he uses the term strange stranger. And so that's what we're trying to envision the planet as. That's what we're trying to envision local communities as. To really love anything is to encounter it as a strange stranger that shatters all of your horizons of what you think the world is, where you think you're headed, where you think you came from. So that's what we're really urging everybody to do, along with reading our special issue once it comes out. But more than that is try and fall in love with something that's beyond your horizon of love. And to some extent fall in love with the unlovable, right? Which would include all of the disasters and all of the catastrophe that make up our current planetary civilization. And maybe even trailer parks need love too. And maybe those are more lovable than our ideas of pristine nature and things like that, precisely because they're so unlovable. That's where love needs to go. Whatever's strange and the strangest and the most surprising parts of your world, that's where love is coming in. And that will presumably take us not toward a globalization that's homogenizing the world, and it won't take us toward an anti-globalization that'll just degenerate into pockets of tribes of humans isolated from one another. Instead, this will generate something like a sustainable Earth community with which humans are integral. So I think we have a couple minutes, half a minute for a question, maybe. Alex.
I just love everything you just said. That was really cool. I'm glad there's other people out there working with this sense of relationships being constituted out of other things. I have a question about just what you touched about loving trailer parks. If we see globalization as like an other, is there a sense of how we can enter into like an erotic relationship with this kind of Ahrimanic, Technozoic kind of? How do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we court? How do we romance this thing that's devouring our planet?
Yeah, it's in a way it's hard not to. Basically, if you encounter this thing that's destroying our planet, that sounds strange, that sounds surprising. How could you not fall in love with something so violent? How could you not fall in love with something that so shatters our idea about what humans should be doing? Right? It seems so horribly unnatural and so horribly against the very progress of evolution that it seems like it would shock us out of our horizon of meaning. It would shock you out of all your preconceived notions and all of your habits. So really, yeah, I'd be surprised if anybody said it was difficult to love. It's so dreadfully unlovable. It's like that little puppy at the pound that's like, oh, it's going to die really soon. It's got at least 6 or 7 different diseases. That's the one I want. And that's where love goes. And this also seems obviously Christian, about trying to love that which has precisely been rejected by society. So that to me, the idea that we should all love nature sounds really ridiculous. What we should love is global capitalism. That's stranger. That's weirder. And if we can fall in love with that, we'll develop a companion species relationship with it. Right. We'll enter into responsible, mutually transformative, and non-coercive contact that'll be able to transform globalization into a sustainable, multi-form planetary civilization. Is that it?
Okay, we're going to get Stephen Goodman set up here.